This is the Mandarin?
I know, it's embarrassing.
Now, I've mentioned before that really the only MCU movies worth talking about are either the really good ones or the really bad ones. But I want to add a third category for the ones worth talking about, and that's the divisive ones. I'm talking about the ones that get a lot of positive reception and are generally well liked, but there is a strong subsection of fans that really don't like them. I'm talking about the ones like Thor Ragnarok, Black Panther, Civil War, and the topic of this video, Iron Man 3. So Iron Man 3 was released in 2013 and was the first movie to kick off Phase 2, similar to how Iron Man kicked off Phase 1 in 2008. This was also the first movie in the MCU to follow the Avengers, and the hype was huge for this. For starters, everyone was still on the Avengers high, and people were interested in seeing how the events of that movie would affect the MCU going forward. And on top of that, Robert Downey Jr. was on a hot streak, and has truly made a career comeback, thanks in large part to the MCU, but shout out to Guy Ritchie's Sherlock Holmes movies, fucking love them. So fans were really invested in Tony Stark, and they really liked Robert Downey Jr., and now the MCU hype really started here, and many wanted to see what this whole shared universe thing had to offer. So the movie released, and it was received pretty well, and it was the second Marvel movie to hit $1 billion at the box office. So you figure with the amount of money it made and the positive reviews, that it's safe to say that the movie was fine. And generally speaking, I guess it was. But there are certain fans who really don't like this movie, which is why it's worth talking about. And I'm gonna be real with you guys. When I first saw this back in 2013, I didn't mind it. I didn't love it, but also didn't hate it. But then I hopped on the hate train a few years later when I started learning more about the Mandarin in the comics and looking at the movie more critically. But now again, years later, I changed my stance on it. Don't worry, I'm not saying that it's amazing or that I love it now, but there are things here that I do appreciate more looking back at it, and I don't dislike it nearly as much as I did like 4 or 5 years ago. And now, nearly a decade later, I've seen both sides of the argument, and I have a better understanding on why people like and dislike this movie. But really what I want to do is just go through the movie and mention the things that I really do think it does well, things that I like, and where people have issues with it, and really try to see what caused the gap between the people who enjoy it and the ones who hate it. And just ask the question, was it really that bad? So it's going to be similar to my Thor Ragnarok video. I'm going to assume you've already seen the movie and know what happens, so spoilers ahead.
You're not him, the Mandarin, the real guy.
Where? Where's the Mandarin? Where is it?
Alright, let's set the stage. This takes place after the events of the Avengers movie, and Tony Stark is growing more and more paranoid, as well as having panic attacks. And it all stems from carrying a nuke through a giant wormhole into space, and having this constant fear of another alien invasion or another big threat happening. This has caused him to work around the clock building more and more suits in order to perfect them in the case of another threat. And well, another threat happens. A terrorist going by the name of the Mandarin is making threats against America, its president, and taking responsibility for a bunch of bombings. So now, while trying to battle his inner conflicts, Tony must find a way to take out this new threat. Now, upon rewatching it, I found myself enjoying parts of it more than I did before. One thing I appreciate is that this was right after the Avengers, so the Joss Whedon-esque quippy dialogue and humor isn't as apparent or abundant here. Tony Stark still feels the same as it did before, and the sarcastic one-liners do work for his character and the way he's been established in the MCU. So the humor overall is actually pretty fine here. But I also gotta credit most of that to Robert Downey Jr. because he's great in this role. He has the right attitude, he has really good delivery, so these jokes and one-liners work for his character. Although there still are a few times where a joke either made me cringe or roll my eyes. But overall, I found it fine. It's actually kind of weird to see me praising the humor in an MCU movie. That's because it's not very quip heavy, and this type of humor itself works well with Tony Stark, so it doesn't really feel that out of place or forced. But the biggest thing I liked seeing was Tony struggle with his anxiety and suffer from panic attacks because of the events of the Avengers. Seeing him as a paranoid wreck, constantly making suits prepare for another threat, and seeing it tear a rift in his personal life was actually interesting to see. And then him finally overcoming it towards the end. Overall, I thought it was a very interesting direction to take his character, and it connected well with the Avengers movie. And it was just really refreshing to see Stark go from this calm, cool, smart, collected guy to being a scared, paranoid wreck. So yeah, I really liked seeing his personal journey in this one. And really to add to that, I like how Tony doesn't have access to his vast amounts of technology for about half the movie, requiring him to think on his feet and use whatever limited tools he has at his disposal. I thought it was a good way to create conflict by taking away the thing he always had access to, his money and his technology, leaving him with only his wits. But you still get a decent amount of sections with the Iron Man suits towards the end, and some very creative sequences where he has to use just the one that he has, and it's all busted up and broken, all leading to some pretty creative and fun action sequences. So I really enjoyed all that, and I thought it was a unique way to make the movie feel fresh, and as a way to like handicap Tony so that he's not overpowered throughout the whole film. Oh yeah, and also like Rhodey this time around. In Iron Man 2, him and Stark don't really feel like friends. They felt more like co-workers being passive aggressive to each other. Honestly, mostly everyone in the movie felt that way, but here they have much better chemistry, and they actually do feel like friends. And I like how they worked War Machine into the story by having Killian's company be the ones to redesign the suit, then later on using it to kidnap the president. So yeah, there's actually a decent amount of things that I do like now rewatching it. Also, as a bonus, I will say that this poster goes hard as shit. Not this one, but this one. Seriously, it looks cool as hell. Oh yeah, and shout out for Tony for dropping the realest shit ever said in an MCU movie.
Which happens, dads leave, no need to be a pussy about it. Here's what I need.
Man, those words hit me like my dad used to.
You got a minute to live, fill it with words.
So like I said, when I rewatched it, I noticed a lot of things about it that I did actually enjoy. But there's just one big thing that makes or breaks this movie for most people, and that's the Mandarin twist. Yeah, you guys knew I was going to talk about this. While I was rewatching, I forgot how well the scenes with the Mandarin were done. The propaganda videos, the speeches, even his whole personality and delivery were a bit played up, but I thought it worked well. And then the twist happens, and that's when a lot of people turned on the movie. When it's revealed that he's an actor, and he's just doing the bidding of Killian, a lot of fans of the comics thought it completely butchered the original source material. But I would even say that it also upset a lot of people who were enjoying the movie up until that point, because it spends about half of the runtime building him up, only for it to pull the rug from underneath you and say, psych! Psych! This less interesting guy is the mastermind behind it all. And that's the main issue. They swap out one decently developed villain for one that isn't as interesting. Now, I actually did like Killian working with the Mandarin, and I thought he had decent enough motivation to turn against Stark, and hell, I like Guy Pearce, he's a good actor. But I would rather him just be working with the Mandarin and be one of his pawns, instead of the mastermind behind it all, because I find him far less interesting. It really feels like this twist kind of sours the whole experience, and everything it does well is just tossed aside because of the second half of the movie. Or at least that's how a lot of people feel. Although I guess one good thing came out of this, and that's finally getting the Mandarin in Shang-Chi. Sure, he's not fighting Iron Man, but he was still pretty great and easily one of the best MCU villains. Now, I've seen people point to this short that is a bonus on the Thor the Dark World Blu-ray that has Trevor going to prison after he's arrested in Iron Man 3, and he gets confronted by somebody who's actually working for the real Mandarin. Now, these people point to it and say, see, they have a plan all along to bring in the real Mandarin, but honestly, I don't buy that. You see, this was released on the Thor the Dark World Blu-ray in 2014, not the Iron Man 3 Blu-ray that came out before Thor 2 did. So this was clearly a response to the fans that didn't like what they did with the Mandarin, and since it was too late to add it to Iron Man 3 as a bonus feature, they threw it onto Thor 2's bonus features instead. So I don't believe they ever actually intend to bring in another Mandarin, or the real Mandarin I should say, until they heard fan outcry. So they made this short featurette as a way to be able to one day retcon it at a later point. And that's very smart, but I'm not going to pretend that they had this plan from the very beginning. It's okay to admit that they messed up and fumbled it a bit, but I give them credit for finding a way to retcon it in the future, which eventually led to one of my favorite MCU villains. Really, the whole Mandarin thing is the biggest issue that people who don't like the movie have with it. Most comic book fans didn't like it, and some movie-going fans didn't like it either. Although, of course, there are several others that are just completely fine with it and don't really care at all. It's all really going to vary from person to person on how they really feel about it. But there are a few other smaller issues that I have with this movie personally, and it's either just a few strange moments, or some situations that feel pretty contrived. Like, for example, after the explosion that nearly kills Happy, Tony digitally recreates the whole scene, and his technology is so damn good that it recreates it perfectly, down to a pair of dog tags that Happy was pointing to and reaching for before he passed out. And through his digital technology, Stark is able to pick up those dog tags, clean them up, and actually read them. Like, I know Stark technology is good, but come on. Also, who could forget about this house getting blown apart by rockets and miniguns and everyone is just fine? A cool sequence, and sets up him losing access to his suits for a while pretty well. That always bugged me. But then there's also even smaller things that kind of bother me. Like when Tony meets Harley. So the kid walks in, he sees Stark, and he doesn't know who he is. But then it's revealed that he knows who Iron Man is. And after Stark tells him that, Harley hands him a newspaper with Tony Stark's picture in it and says, technically you're dead. So he does know who he is, right? But then at the end of the conversation, he asks him what's his name is. And it's like, what? You're a smart kid. You had the newspaper with his photo. Did you not read it? The interaction just felt a little weird. Or when Tony bumps into the evil chick outside of the bar, and he's looking for Miss Davis, and it looks like she's walking away from the bar, but then she goes back in and tries to capture Tony. And it's implied that she's the one who's supposed to be meeting Miss Davis to get the file. But when you first see her, she's walking away from the bar, despite not meeting Miss Davis first. And even if it was a trap to try to capture Tony, what was the point when she could have snatched him up outside? I feel like they wanted a cool action sequence, but weren't exactly sure how to set it up. I mean, all they really had to do was just have him not bump into her outside of the bar. Because it looks like she's walking out of the bar, despite the fact that she's supposed to be meeting someone inside the bar. And I mean, if she really wanted to capture Tony, she had her chance outside. And clearly she's not that worried about discretion, because while inside the bar, she starts killing people immediately. I don't know, the whole sequence has me scratching my head. Or how about when they get Rhodey out of his suit, no one locks him up or restrains him. They just knock him out and forget about him, only for him to wake up like 10 minutes later to meet Tony. Now, all these things aren't a big deal, but it's one of those things that when I look back, they always stick out to me. And if I really wanted to, I could nitpick more stuff, but I really don't want to.
Ready for another lesson? Blah, blah, blah.
Boy, ain't no way, boy.
So in conclusion, I like a lot of the ideas presented here, and thought I executed some of them pretty well. And I also like the direction they took Stark and his character in. And there are some small issues with some scenes and a few contrived moments for the sake of the plot, but the action is pretty damn solid, creative, and fun. Him not being able to use his suit for a portion of the movie made things much more interesting. But I'm torn because, just like most, I enjoyed it up until the big reveal and twist that pulls the rug out from underneath you and just sours the rest of the movie. And it's nothing to do with comic accuracy, it's just a simple fact that they built this guy up only to replace him with a less interesting villain. But looking past that and thinking about it over the years, if you ignore the twist, it's a pretty damn solid movie. Not as good as Iron Man 1, but definitely better than Iron Man 2. Like I said, I flip-flopped on this movie several times. And I think the fact that we have the real Mandarin now has allowed me to go easier on this movie. You know, with the power of hindsight and all that. But there are people out there who just do not like the twist, and still to this day think it's pretty dumb. And you know what? That's fair. It all comes down to everybody's personal preference. Which reminds me, I put out a post asking you guys, what do you think about Iron Man 3 now looking back on it? And I saw some fairly mixed responses. Some people say that it grew on them, some say they always liked it, but there are still some that do not like this movie, and it all stems from the Mandarin twist. Or they're not really a big fan of the direction they took Tony Stark. And I did see several others say that now that we've got the real Mandarin in the MCU, their hatred for Iron Man 3 has subsided a bit. But anyway guys, that's gonna do it for the video. Hope you enjoy. If you did, go and drop a like on it. And leave a comment, let me know, what do you think about Iron Man 3 now in 2022? How'd you feel about it in 2013? And how you feel about it now? Leave a comment and let me know. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.
Put my hands against, put my best of put my 10 a 10, put my ass, put my hands against.